One has to belong to the intelligentsia to believe things like that. No ordinary man could be such a fool. George Orwell. Take away freedom of speech, and the creative faculties dry up. At 50 everyone has the face he deserves. Beauty is meaningless until it is shared. In this country, intellectual cowardice is the worst enemy a writer or journalist has to face. Unpopular ideas can be silenced, and inconvenient facts kept dark, without the need for any official ban. At any given moment there is an orthodoxy, a body of ideas which it is assumed that all right-thinking people will accept without question. The point is that we are all capable of believing things which we know to be untrue, and then, when we are finally proved wrong, impudently twisting the facts so as to show that we were right. Intellectually, it is possible to carry on this process for an indefinite time. The only check on it is that sooner or later a false belief bumps up against solid reality, usually on a battlefield. When I see a policeman with a club beating a man on the ground, I don't have to ask whose side I'm on. To be corrupted by totalitarianism, one does not have to live in a totalitarian country. The typical socialist, a prim little man with a white-collar job, usually a secret teetotaler and often with vegetarian leanings. Liberal, a power worshipper without power.
Don't forget to subscribe. Afterwards, the wisest and most spiritual books from the greatest authors await you every day. And now buckle up, sit back and we'll begin.
Comrades, he cried, you do not imagine, I hope, that we pigs are doing this in a spirit of selfishness and privilege? Many of us actually dislike milk and apples. I dislike them myself. Our sole object in taking these things is to preserve our health. Milk and apples, this has been proved by science, comrades, contain substances absolutely necessary to the well-being of a pig. We pigs are brain workers. The whole management and organization of this farm depend on us. Day and night we are watching over your welfare. It is for your sake that we drink the milk and eat those apples. The way to make $1 million is to start a religion. Never use a metaphor, simile, or other figure of speech which you are used to seeing in print. Never use a long word where a short one will do. If it is possible to cut a word out, always cut it out. Never use the passive voice where you can use the active. Never use a foreign phrase, a scientific word, or a jargon word if you can think of an everyday English equivalent. Break any of these rules sooner than say anything outright barbarous. A dirty joke is not, of course, a serious attack on morality, but it is a sort of mental rebellion, a momentary wish that things were otherwise. Rich people are poor people with money. The writers I care about most and never grow tired of are Shakespeare, Swift, Fielding, Dickens, Charles Reade, Flaubert, and, among modern writers, James Joyce, T.S. Eliot and D.H. Lawrence. But I believe the modern writer who has influenced me most is Somerset Maugham, whom I admire immensely for his power of telling a story straightforwardly and without frills. Public opinion, because of the tremendous urge to conformity in gregarious animals, is less tolerant than any system of law. The fallacy is to believe that under a dictatorial government you can be free inside. Until they became conscious they will never rebel, and until after they have rebelled they cannot become conscious. The choice before human beings is not, as a rule, between good and evil but between two evils. You can let the Nazis rule the world, that is evil, or you can overthrow them by war, which is also evil. There is no other choice before you, and whichever you choose you will not come out with clean hands. To survive it is often necessary to fight, and to fight you have to dirty yourself. For if leisure and security were enjoyed by all alike, the great mass of human beings who are normally stupefied by poverty would become literate and would learn to think for themselves, and when once they had done this, they would sooner or later realize that the privileged minority had no function, and they would sweep it away. In the long run, a hierarchical society was only possible on a basis of poverty and ignorance. As with the Christian religion, the worst advertisement for socialism is its adherents. What can you do against the lunatic who is more intelligent than yourself, who gives your arguments a fair hearing and then simply persists in his lunacy? If thought corrupts language, language can also corrupt thought. A bad usage can spread by tradition and imitation even among people who should and do know better. Pacifism is objectively pro-fascist. It was terribly dangerous to let your thoughts wander when you were in any public place or within range of a telescreen. The smallest thing could give you away. A nervous tic, an unconscious look of anxiety, a habit of muttering to yourself anything that carried with it the suggestion of abnormality, of having something to hide. In any case, to wear an improper expression on your face was itself a punishable offense. There was even a word for it in newspeak, face crime. If you turn the other cheek, you will get a harder blow on it than you got on the first one. This does not always happen, but it is to be expected, and you ought not to complain if it does happen. In a society in which there is no law, and in theory no compulsion, the only arbiter of behavior is public opinion. But public opinion, because of the tremendous urge to conformity in gregarious animals, is less tolerant than any system of law. When human beings are governed by thou shalt not, the individual can practice a certain amount of eccentricity. When they are supposedly governed by love or reason, he is under continuous pressure to make him behave and think in exactly the same way as everyone else. On the whole, human beings want to be good, but not too good, and not quite all the time. Good prose should be transparent, like a window pane. Every war, when it comes, or before it comes, is represented not as a war but as an act of self-defense against a homicidal maniac. A man receiving charity always hates his benefactor. It is a fixed characteristic of human nature. The hospital is the antechamber to the tomb. All left-wing parties in the highly industrialized countries are at bottom a sham, because they make it their business to fight against something which they do not really wish to destroy. They have internationalist aims, and at the same time they struggle to keep up a standard of life with which those aims are incompatible. We all live by robbing Asiatic coolies, and those of us who are enlightened all maintain that those coolies ought to be set free, but our standard of living, and hence our enlightenment, demands that the robbery shall continue. History has stopped. Nothing exists except an endless present in which the party is always right. It is one of the tragedies of the half-educated that they develop late, when they are already committed to some wrong way of life. Serious sport has nothing to do with fair play. It is bound up with hatred, jealousy, boastfulness, disregard of all rules and sadistic pleasure in witnessing violence. In other words, it is war minus the shooting. And if all others accepted the lie which the party imposed, if all records told the same tale, then the lie passed into history and became truth. Who controls the past ran the party slogan, controls the future. Who controls the present controls the past. The essential point here is that all people with small, insecure incomes are in the same boat and ought to be fighting on the same side. Probably we could do with a little less talk about capitalist and proletarian and a little more about the robbers and the robbed. In our time, political speech and writing are largely the defense of the indefensible. No advance in wealth, no softening of manners, no reform or revolution has ever brought human equality a millimeter nearer. The aims of these three groups are entirely irreconcilable. The aim of the high is to remain where they are. The aim of the middle is to change places with the high. The aim of the low, when they have an aim for it, is an abiding characteristic of the low that they are too much crushed by drudgery to be more than intermittently conscious of anything outside their daily lives, is to abolish all distinctions and create a society in which all men shall be equal. We believe half instinctively that evil always defeats itself in the long run. Pacifism is founded largely on this belief. Don't resist evil, and it will somehow destroy itself. But why should it? What evidence is there that it does? Unless conquered from the outside by military force? There is only one way to make money at writing, and that is to marry a publisher's daughter. A scrupulous writer, in every sentence that he writes, will ask himself at least 4 questions, thus: 1. What am I trying to say? 2. What words will express it? 3. What image or idiom will make it clearer? 4. Is this image fresh enough to have an effect? The choice before human beings is not, as a rule, between good and evil but between two evils. It is the same in all wars. The soldiers do the fighting, the journalists do the shouting, and no true patriot ever gets near a frontline trench, except on the briefest of propaganda tours. One cannot really be a Catholic and grown up. The plant is blind, but it knows enough to keep pushing upwards towards the light, and it will continue to do this in the face of endless discouragements. But if thought corrupts language, language can also corrupt thought. This life we live nowadays, it's not life, it's stagnation, death in life. Look at all these bloody houses and the meaningless people inside them. Sometimes I think we're all corpses, just rotting upright. It is curious how people take it for granted that they have a right to preach at you and pray over you as soon as your income falls below a certain level. We control matter because we control the mind. Reality is inside the skull. When I talk to anyone or read the writings of anyone who has any axe to grind, I feel that intellectual honesty and balanced judgment have simply disappeared from the face of the earth. Everyone's thought is forensic, everyone is simply putting a case with deliberate suppression of his opponent's point of view, and, what is more, with complete insensitiveness to any sufferings except those of himself and his friends. Freedom is the freedom to say that 2 plus 2 make 4. If that is granted, all else follows. Patriotism has nothing to do with conservatism. It is actually the opposite of conservatism, since it is a devotion to something that is always changing and yet is felt to be mystically the same. One's got to change the system, or one changes nothing. The capitalists owned everything in the world, and everyone else was their slave. They owned all the land, all the houses, all the factories, and all the money. If anyone disobeyed them, they could throw him into prison, or they could take his job away and starve him to death. When any ordinary person spoke to a capitalist, he had to cringe and bow to him, and take off his cap and address him as sir. In a way, the worldview of the party imposed itself most successfully on people incapable of understanding it. They could be made to accept the most flagrant violations of reality, because they never fully grasped the enormity of what was demanded of them, and were not sufficiently interested in public events to notice what was happening. By lack of understanding, they remained sane. They simply swallowed everything, and what they swallowed did them no harm, because it left no residue behind, just as a grain of corn will pass undigested through the body of a bird. The past is whatever the records and the memories agree upon. No one believes more firmly than Comrade Napoleon that all animals are equal. He would be only too happy to let you make your decisions for yourselves. But sometimes you might make the wrong decisions, comrades, and then where should we be? The opinion that art should have nothing to do with politics is itself a political attitude. No one is patriotic about taxes. The modern writer who has influenced me most is W. Somerset Maugham. The relative freedom which we enjoy depends on public opinion. The law is no protection. Governments make laws, but whether they are carried out, and how the police behave, depends on the general temper in the country. If large numbers of people are interested in freedom of speech, there will be freedom of speech, even if the law forbids it. If public opinion is sluggish, inconvenient minorities will be persecuted, even if laws exist to protect them. When I see an actual flesh and blood worker in conflict with his natural enemy, the policeman, I do not have to ask myself which side I am on. We have become too civilized to grasp the obvious. For the truth is very simple. To survive, you often have to fight, and to fight you have to dirty yourself. War is evil, and it is often the lesser evil. Those who take the sword perish by the sword, and those who don't take the sword perish by smelly diseases. And if our book consumption remains as low as it has been, at least let us admit that it is because reading is a less exciting pastime than going to the dogs, the pictures or the pub, and not because books, whether bought or borrowed, are too expensive. The object of power is power. Myths which are believed in tend to become true. Sooner or later a false belief bumps up against solid reality, usually on a battlefield. The essential act of war is destruction, not necessarily of human lives, but of the products of human labor. War is a way of shattering to pieces, or pouring into the stratosphere, or sinking in the depths of the sea, materials which might otherwise be used to make the masses too comfortable, and hence, in the long run, too intelligent. Huge events like the Ukraine famine of 1933, involving the deaths of millions of people, have actually escaped the attention of the majority of English Russophiles. Enlightened people seldom or never possess a sense of responsibility. The best books are those that tell you what you know already. If you kept the small rules, you could break the big ones. All propaganda is lies, even when one is telling the truth. The essence of being human is that one does not seek perfection. Apparently nothing will ever teach these people that the other 99% of the population exist. Orthodoxy is the ability to say 2 and 2 make 5 when faith requires it. You will be hollow. We shall squeeze you empty, and then we shall fill you with ourselves. When I joined the militia, I had promised myself to kill one fascist. After all, if each of us killed one, they would soon be extinct. Does Big Brother exist? Of course he exists. The party exists. Big Brother is the embodiment of the party. Does he exist in the same way as I exist? You do not exist. Those who abjure violence can do so only because others are committing violence on their behalf. We are in a strange period of history in which a revolutionary has to be a patriot and a patriot has to be a revolutionary. Rifles, muskets, longbows and hand grenades are inherently democratic weapons. A complex weapon makes the strong stronger, while a simple weapon, so long as there is no answer to it, gives claws to the weak. Happiness can exist only in acceptance. Fate seemed to be playing a series of extraordinarily unamusing jokes. You must be an intellectual. A normal person would never believe a thing like that. He gazed up at the enormous face. 40 years it had taken him to learn what kind of smile was hidden beneath the dark mustache. Oh cruel, needless misunderstanding. Oh stubborn, self-willed exile from the loving breast. 2 gin-scented tears trickled down the sides of his nose. But it was all right, everything was all right, the struggle was finished. He had won the victory over himself. He loved Big Brother. By using stale metaphors, similes and idioms, you save much mental effort, at the cost of leaving your meaning vague, not only for your reader but for yourself. It was almost normal for people over 30 to be frightened of their own children. Progress is not an illusion, it happens, but it is slow and invariably disappointing. It is almost universally felt that when we call a country democratic we are praising it. Consequently, the defenders of every kind of regime claim that it is a democracy, and fear that they might have to stop using the word if it were tied down to any one meaning. There are books that one reads over and over again, books that become part of the furniture of one's mind and alter one's whole attitude to life, books that one dips into but never reads through, books that one reads at a single sitting and forgets a week later. The quickest way of ending a war is to lose it. I watched him, a fat Russian agent, with some interest, for it was the first time that I had seen a person whose profession was telling lies, unless one counts journalists. Nationalism is power hunger tempered by self-deception. By patriotism I mean devotion to a particular place and a particular way of life, which one believes to be the best in the world but has no wish to force on other people. George Orwell. Big Brother is watching you.
And that's not all. Our experts and regular viewers respond to all comments. Also check if you forgot to subscribe and set your bell to receive notifications about new audiobooks and other useful self-development materials that we release regularly. Join in the discussions, don't forget to give likes and, if possible and inspired, support the development of the channel financially. All useful links will be in the description and the first attached comment. Goodness, love and wisdom to all. And now move on to watch the next part of the video at the links below, or choose something from the playlists of the channel and those you see on the screen.